Okay, I want to do a video blog on this because I don't want to take the time to write it out. I'm feeling kind of lazy today. Imagine that. Don't want to write. But your question, do I think that God's love for us has a component of Eros in it? My answer is yes. Here's why. Three fundamental ideas that I bring into my answer. The first is in Genesis when God says that we are made in His image. I take that to mean that everything that exists in the human essence somehow points back to God. There's nothing in us that doesn't somehow reveal the nature of God. Okay? First thing. Second thing is I believe that our bodies are our interface to the I don't know, deeper is the right word, but we're not pure spiritual beings. So we have a spiritual reality, very intangible, very mysterious, and so I think that our bodies exist to enable us to interface, in computer speak, if you will, to interface with our world and with each other. Now, this doesn't answer the question as to why we aren't pure spiritual beings in the first place. Don't have the answer to that one, but the nature of the reality that we live in is that we are spiritual beings living in a physical world, and that our bodies are means by which we interface with the world and with each other. And then the third core belief in my answer is that I believe that if not the primary objective, one of the core objectives that God has in the life of a disciple is to, in a lot of different ways, arouse in us a desire for Him and for His kingdom and for one another, and all the values that flow from that desire for the kingdom. God could easily have made us moral automatons at the point that we confess Christ, or He could be the kind of God that whacks us on the nose with a newspaper every single time that we screw up, but He doesn't do that. And so to me, as I've said before, I don't think Jesus died to make us better people. I think Jesus died to enable us to desire God in a better way. And I believe that specifically because grace and the lack of immediate disciplinary feedback from God, all of those things point to me that though God does have morality, I think the higher objective in our lives is not just to make us moral people, but to have us be people who desire Him and His kingdom. So, those three things being said, let me now explain and tie together why I think Eros is a component of God's love. So, if you take the notion of affection, whatever affection is, I don't know what the Greek word is for affection, but I have affection for my favorite Formula One driver, or I have affection for my cats, and I like to ride my bike. Okay, so you have this superficial, I like this kind of thing, or I like this person. Okay, and then you have phileo, where you've got the good, deep relationship with another person. You know, as you said to me a while ago, we're as close as two men can be without being florists. So you have that, and then you have the agape love, and then you have Eros. So, because we're made in God's image, because our bodies are interfaced to one another's spiritual reality, and what's my third thing? Oh, and because God's primary desire is to arouse, or objective is to arouse desire for Him, I think that Eros is a component of desire, and that God does feel Eros for it. You mentioned Hosea. Hosea is a very interesting example because not only was it a real-time metaphor for Hosea, but it was also a situation where God was dealing with the sense of betrayal and calling His people adulterers. Jesus called people adulterers, and we see the prophets calling us adulterers as well. An adulterer has two distinct characteristics, maybe three: betrayal, relational, and sexual. And all of those three things point back to Eros. Now, the reason why I think it's important to consider that our bodies are our primary interface is that's where the sexual component of Eros comes in. By the nature of us living in a physical world, when ideally a man and a woman come together and they share an erotic love for one another, the depth of that desire and the depth of that relationship is experienced, or can be experienced, in a sexual in a sexual union in a way that's not possible with agape or phileo or affection. So I think that the sexual component is what may trip people up when they consider Eros as being a part of God's desire for people, because it's very hard for us, and it's a little off color here, but it's hard for us to imagine God getting an erection or being wet in reference to his people. So I think that the sexual component is just the result of two people needing to come together physically to experience one another at a deeper level, relationally and physically. So all of those all of those types of love, I believe, have as their primary motive desire, and there are lots of other things going on with each of those. Like for example, on the Eros side, from a beauty perspective, I can look at a selection of women and have varying levels of erotic response or desire for them based on my perception of their relative beauty in comparison to each other, and how their beauty responds, or how I respond to their beauty, whatever I find beautiful, right? But the nature of that desire, that Eros desire, which is intimate, which is deep, it is peculiar, it's distinct, it is uncommon for one person to have that kind of desirable, desire-filled relationship. I can have lots of affections out there. I can be good friends with several people. There's only a few people that I really am willing to give agape to, and even then I do a pretty crappy job of it. And then the Eros piece of it, that is, you're seeing a funneling down of within an individual's life as to who each type of love can be experienced to. So I think that Eros is a deeper love, it's a more profound love, it's a distinct, unique, and peculiar kind of love that still reflects to God, and it does map to our relationship with him. All we need to do to grasp that, I think, is to remove the sexual component and recognize that the sexual component is necessary for physical bodies to come together and experience the spiritual piece of Eros. So hopefully that makes sense.